can we go to the next slide, please? So as we go into after the staffing, we have been in the process of developing the hybrid schedules. And I wanted to give just a little bit of background of how these hybrid schedules were developed. We have a committee that has been working to provide some insight as to what would work best in our school communities. We have had some input from a national bank of different schedules that our school districts around the country and even in different parts of the world have been implementing. So we have looked at various models and narrowed in on 6, and then continue to narrow and discuss with our principals the best model. What you will see in the guidance is considerations that we thought about as we were designing. So a major area was space. And this work that happened more closely in the spring actually was a continuation of what happened in the summer. And there was guidance that was developed around how many students in each of our classrooms would fit given the current CDC guidance. We know that that is being adjusted. We know that there's a discussion about the 3 feet versus the 6 feet. And we are still working through that. We're closer to 4 to 6 feet in that discussion. But we developed a dashboard that took into consideration the square footage of every single classroom in our district and labeled how many students would fit into that particular classroom. So we know our space constraints. Tara just went through the staffing, and we know right now we're in the voluntary phase and we'll move into the mandatory phase. But we do have to consider what are the best models that we can implement given our staffing situation. And then of course, students, and many of you have been responding to the student intent to return form, which tells us if you're intending to be in person when we do hybrid instruction, or if you're planning to stay in distance learning. It's very interesting. You saw a report that we released, I believe it was now almost 2 weeks ago, of the results. And about half of our students are choosing to remain in distance learning. So it was really important, and this came up a lot in the considerations in our discussions, that we maintain a current distance schedule. That would be important, and that we wouldn't limit the amount of in-person instruction, but we would want to maintain that consistency. So space, staff, students were all a part of the process to develop the hybrid schedule. Now, I'll take us into the next slide, which is the hybrid schedules. We released these on Saturday. You can refer back to that email, and also when this this deck goes out to the community, you'll be able to click on the different schedules. You'll notice just how complex our entire school system is, because we do have different programs, and we couldn't just set one schedule for the entire district, because we do have different time considerations for those different grade spans. So we do have a preschool schedule for the general education part day. We have a preschool schedule for a full day, which is both general education and special education. We have an elementary hybrid schedule, an elementary special day class schedule, a secondary hybrid schedule, a secondary special education SPC schedule. We also have a young adult program, which serves our special education students that are from 18 to 22 years old. That is included. And adult education will start on April 19th. We are still in the process of developing those schedules. I want to reiterate that we, as we set schedules, we do continue to negotiate the impact that OEA identifies through implementation of these schedules. So I'm going to take us through 2 specific schedules, and we'll answer Q&A after we go through those schedules. So the next slide is the elementary schedule. So you can see where we're trying to remain consistent in the instructional program to offer synchronous instruction through Zoom from the 9 to 11:30 block. And then from the 11:30 block to 12:30, that would be the transition time for Group A and Group B going to campus. Now, the model that we landed on was the AABB plus, of course, C, which is the continual distance learning model. And on Mondays and Tuesdays, we have identified the afternoon, 12:30 to 3 o'clock block as being the in-person time for Group A. And then Wednesday would be a synchronous day in the morning, and then the afternoon, we would remain an asynchronous, so the usual Wednesday schedule. And then Thursday and Friday would be in-person instruction from 12:30 to 3 for Group B. So if you are choosing an in-person option, you would be on campus in the afternoon twice a week for in-person instruction. So that is the details for, those are the details for the elementary hybrid schedule. Now, we did, all of our school sites were provided this schedule. There are probably, here and there a little bit of staggering for the start times, but generally this is what we have, for our schools in terms of expectations for providing in-person instruction. But of course, a school site may vary by, 5 to 10 minutes. And that's why you will receive more definitive schedules from your principal if you have not already. Next slide, please, is the secondary slide. Okay, so for secondary, we're talking about spring. I'll talk about the quarter system towards the end of the spring schedule. So again, we have identified our Monday and Tuesday schedule. Now, for the first part of the opening, it's important to understand priority groups. And we have labeled our priority groups as being students that, students that are at risk for abuse, neglect, or exploitation. This is the language from SB 86. Students that are attending below 60% of the week, English language learners, unhoused students, homeless students, foster youth students, students without secure technology and internet access, students who are in an SEC class who spend more than 50% of their day in a self-contained setting. So those are the students that we consider to be priority students. And those students are the target group for the secondary schedule. Plus, under SC 86, we had to identify one grade level for inclusion in the in-person opportunity. And we recommended and landed on 6th grade as being that grade for priority students. So what you see in the light green shaded areas are the in-person opportunities for students. Now you're still labeled or grouped into the groups A and B. So that is still an option, but you would get an assignment if you opted in for in-person. You would be assigned to either a group A or a group B. And it would work as an advisory schedule. And that is the focus for those opportunities for in-person instruction. So again, offered to 6th grade and students that were through that list that I just named, listed for priority for 7th through 12th grade. The current distance learning schedule would remain intact, just as we discussed for the elementary level, we saw that it's being least disruptive to maintaining that schedule, because many people have already gotten into the rhythm of that morning synchronous time. The schedules will vary based on the current distance learning schedules at each site. So there may be some variation there. And of course, school sites, again, will communicate with their families the specific schedule, but this is what we're expecting more or less for our secondary students. Now, not part of this discussion right now immediately is the discussion about fall. I've received emails. Some of our network superintendents in the high school level have received communication as well. Our superintendent has shared the emails that have come from parents. And we know that the discussion around the quarter system is of concern for families. And what we're going to do is offer an opportunity for families to meet with us in a slightly smaller setting to hear the concerns. It'll be open to the public, of course, but we would have just a specific discussion on the concerns around the quarter system. We know that the way it was implemented this year didn't work for all families. There's especially concern around the advanced placements of the AP courses, certain math courses, and our world language courses not being all throughout the year. And so I'll commit to everyone here this evening to share in about a week's time a open meeting where families can come in and explain the concerns. And then we would turn around with hearing your concerns to consider what was raised during that session with you. So just wanting to acknowledge that we've heard from families that the quarter system didn't work for all students. We're open to the discussion and refining that. That way we make improvements into next year. And I'll be messaging out when we can get together as a smaller group that's interested in the quarter system. So with that, here today, and I should have said this earlier, I apologize. Monica Thomas is an elementary network superintendent. She, along with a couple of principals, really led the design for the elementary schedule, elementary hybrid schedule. And Nicole Knight, along with network superintendents and for middle school and high school, and some principals that led the development of the secondary schedule. So we're all here to answer Q&A, and I'll hand it to Jody so that way we can have more of the discussion, but we're here to answer and listen to the feedback from the community.
Great, thank you, Sandra. So we, as you've seen, a lot of the questions have been answered in the Q&A, and hopefully you can see all the responses. And I'm going to pull out some of the common questions that I see in the Q&A, and also at this point you can raise your hand. I do see about 7 folks who have raised their hand, so we will take some live questions as well. We're going to pause for a Q&A section for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to finish with the second portion of our meeting, which is about the safety guidelines. So a couple questions to start, and then I will go to the raised hands. First, there is several questions about referencing the recent change in guidance from the state about 6 feet distancing to 3 feet distancing. And so just wondering how the district is planning to adjust to that new guidance that came out, and if that potentially means increased cohort size at some point. So if somebody could give a response to the question.
So currently we are using the 4 to 6 feet that we have received from Alameda County. I do understand that that is possibly being updated, and I think that in the next section for our safety considerations, that can be cleared up with Salja's help, because she is has her finger on the pulse when it comes to all of the safety concerns. But as of right now, we have still been using the 4 to 6 measurements until we're directed from Alameda Public Health to adjust. So, Salja, I don't know if you have more to add right now, if you want to take that into the next safety section.
Can you hear me? I will address that in the safety section.
Okay, great. So some questions about what is happening, maybe if I can group a few together. So if you could speak to what will happen with any extracurriculars that students will be receiving, how that plays into the sample schedule. And then the students who opt into in-person instruction, will they be receiving any different instruction that those who stay in remote will not be getting? Obviously they won't be in person, but if you can explain what the students will be receiving in remote at the time that those who choose in person.
In terms of the extracurricular activities, we have been discussing this as like if they're coming in person and then also are opting into in-person extracurricular activities, there is a limit to the number of cohorts that students can participate in. The limit is 2 cohorts. So we are, mindful of that. We've also had discussions around once you start in a cohort, you can't really intermix cohorts. And that's why we've developed the schedule the way that we have. So students can participate in up to 2 cohorts if in person. And that is for our school sites to help manage and make sure that students aren't in multiple cohorts. So it is definitely going to be a site-by-site discussion and tracking students specifically. But 1 cohort is considered if you're in-person instruction. And so you would do that schedule as indicated in the rotation. And then you could participate in an extracurricular activity as long as you are maxing with 2 cohorts that you're intermixing with. So that's the first part. And Jody, what is okay, so in the afternoon, when students are in person, the question is, what is the instruction going to look like for students that are at home in distance learning? So as usual, they would be doing asynchronous instruction. And then as we continue to develop and refine the model, we want to add more small group instruction opportunities. And that is what we are looking at with the staffing that we have available. As we complete more of our labor agreements and reach those agreements, we're able to look at the entire staff that was usually on the campus and utilize more of those staff members to offer some of the support. So perhaps you can still do the small group instruction through a support staff person. But most of the time it would be for asynchronous instruction in the afternoon.
Okay. There are a couple questions about IEPs for students with special needs. So we also have our Executive Director of Special Education here, Jennifer Blake. So perhaps these will be for you or Sandra, Ms. Aguilera. So the questions are, what are the supports? How will students continue to get supports with their IEPs given this hybrid schedule? And then is there any preparation if a substitute will be doing the accommodations? How will substitutes be prepared to deliver those supports?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for those questions. As it pertains to the first question, in terms of, or the second question I'll start with rather, in terms of substitutes, we will be making sure that substitutes have copies of the IEPs at a glance for the students who will be participating in their group, as well as making sure that they have lesson plans that are provided by the teacher. Our teachers who are unable to return in person will continue to provide distance learning support and will also continue to lead the instruction of the group in accordance with students' IEPs, thereby being able to provide direction to the support staff and to the teacher. And Jody, if you could remind me of the first question again, was it just around how services will be provided? Great.
Yes.
So in terms of how services will be provided during this time, we do have students who are participating in specialized programming for 50% or more of their day that will be returning to a school day that is almost a full school day, 4 days per week, with 1 day per week dedicated to distance learning instruction exclusively. For students who are in resource or inclusion-based programming or who have related services such as speech, we will be working with our providers to build schedules that are hybrid schedules. This will mean that they will have the maximum amount of in-person instruction possible using the small cohorts that are stable. And some students will continue to receive service in distance learning via virtual modality as well. But all of our related service personnel will be returning at the same timeline that was just shared in the presentation, and we'll begin working with students in small groups in person at that time as well.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share, take one more question that's a theme I'm seeing in the Q&A, and then I'll go to some of the hands raised. So this question is about when will families know about whether or not their teacher has opted in for that initial phase? And then I'm going to link it to another question that's somewhat related, but don't worry, I'll remind folks who are answering the questions. Will families have the option to change their choice, either to choose into in-person or to choose out of in-person at any time? So two questions.
So I can begin to answer that question. So Ms. Bard did share that Thursday is our date where we will share that information about in-person instruction at school sites. And so that's where families will receive the most information about who is returning and who is not returning and what will happen next. So we plan to have that ready for Thursday. We are still working through some of the details with our principals and the area superintendents are going site by site to do that planning, and we're almost done. So that's why we were saying we'll be done with that by Thursday. There has been some confusion. We can make sure that principals hear this message as well. We've had, many Friday morning meetings around these different topics, but the details, there's so many that we just want to make sure that everybody is clear on this option around, I said this on my survey, but I want to change my mind, and that is okay. You can definitely choose to opt in to in-person instruction if you chose distance learning. You can make that change. The biggest thing that we are stressing, and the reason why after the first week we wouldn't accept any more students, is because of the cohort. We have to make sure that there's not a lot of intermixing during the cohort or in the cohort, because that's where we want to just avoid students coming in and out because of the safety procedures that we know will help mitigate the spread of coronavirus. So that is why we are going to be strict about, once you make a decision on March 30th, you will stay in. Of course, if you decide you don't want to participate, you can always exit, but we will not be able to take more families in after that first week. And then that will be stable until April 19th, which is another avenue for people to enter and opt in for distance learning. And again, we would keep it stable. And I think Salja will go through those cohort details more in depth when we get into the safety section. But it is possible, if you're having trouble with that, you can reach out to myself. We have many avenues for you to give us that feedback and ask these questions. And we're willing to help that out at your school site if it's not clear how to make sure that you change your option to come back in, or if you want to come in for in-person learning, but you previously said no, you did not want to participate in in-person learning.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's take a few questions from the people who have their hands raised, and then we'll move to the second portion of our meeting. So Delia Araujo, you should be able to unmute yourself now and share your comment or question. Delia, are you there? Can you unmute yourself? There you go. We can hear you. Do you have a question or comment? Okay, we'll come back to you. Let's
No,
go.
está bien, gracias.
Okay, yes. Go ahead, you can ask your question. ¿Quieres hacer una pregunta?
¿Tiene una pregunta para nosotros?
Sí, buenas noches.
Estamos aquí para ayudarle, señores, si tiene una pregunta.
Sí, ¿me escucha? Oh, sí, me escucha, sí. Quería, mi pregunta es, entonces no van a ir diario a la escuela, nada más hay cierto día.
So the question is, oh, should I do the translation or should I not? Okay.
I can do the translation. This is Rebecca
Okay.
Walker.
Okay.
So my question is, are they going to go every day to school or only certain days?
Right. I get confused when I'm
Oh, it went to mute, Ms. Aguilera. Oh. Does that work? Can you unmute yourself? I can't. Oh, okay. Okay. Let me see if I can work that out.
there we go. I think
There it
okay.
is. Good.
Sorry, I was saying that I was translating again in my head, so I'm sorry about that. If you are in, if you chose in-person instruction, you would be assigned to either a group A or a group B. So it depends site by site how many students are saying they want to come to in-person instruction. We have seen it where a full school, a full classroom wants to come back for in-person instruction. So it would be half of the class in group A and half of the class in group B. And then if it's an A-B rotation, the child would come to school twice in that week. Now, I have seen, and we've been working with principals, I have seen that the in-person demand of the people that want to be in person is a smaller number. So it is possible that a classroom could be most of the week in person for that block of time. So it will vary depending on the demand at your school site of how much time is allocated, how many students wanted the option for in-person instruction. Where we can, it could be all week, but when there's more demand, it will be more of that A-B rotation.